Welcome to the GenX Experience, the podcast that celebrates the unique journey of 80s kids navigating midlife. I'm your host, Lib Aubuchon. Each episode, my guests and I will share with you the unique differences that define our generation and how we are navigating those differences in the real world. Join me for laughs, insights, and a sense of community. Let's embrace the GenX Experience together. Welcome to episode 28 of the GenX Experience. I'm happy to have you here. Thank you to everyone who listened to my last episode. It seems to be resonating because the numbers keep increasing. So I hope we keep that trajectory going. Really excited to have as many Gen Xers as part of this community and conversation. Today, in episode 28, we are talking about ageism, which is our topic for May. I know it's not the most uplifting topic coming off of solo travel, but it's an important topic, I think, because a lot of us are dealing with that now, especially if you work in the creative industries. And AI is impacting us, the economy, things are happening. And so I think it's something we should talk about. So I have an interview today with a fellow copywriter. I have a really great interview today with a fellow copywriter, Lib Aubuchon. She is a copywriter and a content strategist for solopreneurs who feel like their real title is CEO of 32 open Google Docs. We can all relate to that. She helps them make sense of all the marketing noise and turn their jumbled thoughts into clear, confident copy that actually sounds like them and sells their stuff. It's what we all want: less stress, more sales, and messaging that we're actually proud to share. And I will include her information in the show notes, as well as she provided a freebie that has 201 creative subject lines, which I know when you're writing emails, especially for your business, subject lines can be a challenge. So Lib and I had a really great conversation covering ageism, our perspectives on it, our thoughts on the New York Times article that came out at the end of March. And we both found the article a little depressing, but we also share our thoughts on why Gen X shouldn't be facing ageism, or not shouldn't be facing ageism, but how we're kind of overlooked and how people forget that we are this very adaptable, entrepreneurial, scrappy generation that did have to learn technology, and how as it evolved as well, because, computers have changed, cell phones have changed, the internet has changed. So employers who think that we don't have value are sorely mistaken. Unfortunately, though, I will say that in the research that I did, I found an article in Forbes, HR Digest, and of course, a couple articles in HR Digest, and of course, the New York Times, which I will all include below because they're very interesting reads. But I believe this comes from HR Digest. A recent study by CWI Labs found that 59% of workers age 50 or older believe their age has created roadblocks in their job hunt. 81% of older workers believe that employers want younger applicants, with 59% of older workers seeing their age as a hiring obstacle. Over 40% of workers state that they've been stuck hunting for a job for at least a year, but only 21% feel optimistic they're going to find a job. And, this is not the first challenge Gen X has faced. We've gone through the dot-com bubble bursting, the 2008 housing crisis. We faced stagnant, wages, and we're, trying to save for retirement. It's not that easy with the way things are going. But, we're a resilient group, and we were once called slackers, but I believe we're not slackers. We are just very scrappy and entrepreneurial, and we will find a way. And I think we need to rely on each other. We're not real great at asking for help, but I think we keep this conversation going amongst ourselves that we can hopefully make a change. It's not easy when we were the first generation to be told we're going to do worse than our parents. And that kind of sets you up for wondering what your life is going to be like when you hit the corporate world and you realize adulting is not all it's cracked up to be, and working for other people is hard, and you can damn the man, but you still had to adapt and figure things out and deal with the corporate culture while also trying to change it. And as a woman who worked in advertising, it's not an easy thing to do. There also was some interesting things in the article that I had a little disagreement with. I'm going to share before we get into my interview. But it was saying that, we started analog and we didn't all move to digital. And I don't think that's true because we didn't have a choice. Like you had to learn how to use a computer at work. We did have to learn to use digital cameras. We did have to learn to use cell phones as they evolved, the internet, like and different technologies that they evolved. We have had to learn them. Now, yes, you get to a certain point where you're like, I don't have any more room for technology in my brain and I don't care about some of these things. But if it relates to your job, we are going to learn it. We are going to figure out. So, and we've developed some of this technology. I mean, hello, Google. That was us. Some other things too, which we should be ashamed of ourselves for. But anyway, I think it's important to read these articles and take them with a grain of salt, but also get some knowledge from them. But I think the best thing to do is to get into my interview with Lib because we have a really great discussion. And I think hearing from other Gen Xers, which is what the whole point of this podcast is very helpful. And without further ado and me talking anymore, let's get into my conversation with Lib Aubuchon. Welcome, Lib, to the Gen X experience. Today, we're going to talk about such a fun topic, ageism, that we are experiencing, or our generation is experiencing now. I feel like it's the second time, right? Because I don't know if you feel this way, but when you start your career, there's a little bit of ageism because you're young and inexperienced. Yeah. People think you don't know anything. And now we're supposed to be in the prime of our careers and we're getting it again.
Yes. Absolutely. I know. Such a fun topic. And you're absolutely right. This is the second round. This is round 2 of ageism. Yeah. It's true.
And most of us have been working like 20 years, give or take. And so it feels a little unfair. I know like we're not the whiny generation. That's the younger generation.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've been thinking lately, I'm like, I feel like we're the middle child of the generations.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like I don't know if you've seen like I'm very much chronically online, like way too much time online, but sometimes there'll be these generational comparisons and it'll be like Gen Z is this way and millennials are this way and boomers are this way and I'm like there's us too, but we are definitely the middle child of everybody.
And I'd like to ask them like, okay, what happened from 1965 to 1980? It just didn't exist?
Like, right. Nobody, yeah, it's really interesting. It's, yeah, I agree. Middle child all the way.
Oh, yeah. So we both are copywriters, so we're both in that creative industry. And there was a recent article, I don't know if you saw it in the New York Times, about the challenges we face. The article was a little depressing.
Oh, yes, it was.
I didn't completely agree with everything they said. But it also made me realize, I'm like, yeah, years ago, because I started my career when the dot-com bubble burst. So, of course, advertising agencies, layoff. And I remember having thoughts of like, maybe I should do something else. I probably should have. So what are your thoughts on, what it's like at our age, not that we're old because we're not, but like being in creative industry and dealing with ageism? Like, what are your thoughts on what we're going through?
Well, how much time have you got, Blythe? I did read that same article, and for context, my ex-husband was like worked in the ad industry, like worked for BBDO and all these different places. So he was the one who told me about the article. Like I actually hadn't seen it, and he was like, "It's super depressing. Like just letting you know, it's really super depressing." And I read it, and it was super depressing. But I started my career in a totally different field. Like when I was a kid and when I was in college, I very much wanted to be a writer. And I pictured, I mean, thank goodness you have the generational context to understand this, that like I pictured myself at like Harper's Bazaar. Like, I'm just like, making a full-time living writing my articles about little fun stuff and fashion and beauty. And I was like, that's what I'm going to get into. And then I graduated from college and was working as a bank teller. And I was just like, oh, this isn't my dreams of just walking into some publishing office and grabbing the plum job isn't working out. So I went back to school and got a master's in education. And I was a teacher for most of my career. Like I was a teacher, elementary school, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade for a long time. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for probably 12 or 15-ish years.
Mhm.
And so I kind of feel like for better or for worse, kind of came in the back door to this world because I had a blog. I used to have a blog. Remember the golden age of blogging, like
Yes.
good times.
So
Yes, I had a blog called Really Real Atlanta Housewife. And it was like, it never made money or anything, but it did because back in those days, like you could share a post on Facebook and 900 people would share it. Like it was great. So that ended up getting me a job with like a local design agency that needed somebody to write their little blurbs and stuff. So I always felt like, oh, I'm not a real creative. Like I always had this feeling like I don't actually know the right terminology. I never worked in corporate. I don't like for a long time I was like, oh, I don't think I can really call myself a copywriter because like yes, I do write to persuade, but like it just was very piecemeal, very like here and there. I would just get picked up for the oddest little assignments and um yeah, and so I kind of had like this imposter syndrome for a long time. And I would say it was just maybe like right before COVID, probably, that I began to feel like, okay, wait, I actually do know what I'm doing. And now enough people are paying me to do what I do that I can like kind of make a living doing it. I mean, like fully make a living. I would like to make more of a living, but it finally felt kind of legit. So
mhm.
it does feel almost like this cruel irony. Like, okay, I finally feel like I've got it together. Other people seem to think I've got it together enough to pay me. And now, like, it's just tanking out, and people are, either hiring somebody who's 25 and who's willing to be paid nothing, or AI, you know,
Yeah.
just so I don't know. That was a really long way of saying it is a little depressing. It's just a little depressing.
Yeah, it I feel the same way as like, yeah, it was like, "Oh, if you're not using AI, you're behind." And I'm like, "Can we stop doing that to people?" Because
Right,
I was
right.
talking about this on my Instagram stories yesterday because I was like, you know, we're so now jumping into technology where I feel
Yeah,
like our generation to, because we're so like, okay, why do we have to do this? And
yeah,
we question things before we jump into it. And even though we're adaptable
yeah,
and I feel like now it's just like, oh, new technology, we're just going to do it regardless of ethics or whether we know where this is coming from, the information is
yeah.
accurate. And we see how much misinformation is out there in every single industry
Right.
aspect.
Yes.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I it's depressing because I'm like AI is not it's still not a human.
No, it's not. And I almost think like there's a bit of a bold prediction here, and I could be so off. Like we could listen to this in 3 years and be like, whoa, that lady didn't know what she was talking about. But I do almost feel like the so we know as people who've been writing for a long time, AI learned from us. So that pisses me off for one thing when people are like, "Oh, if you use the M dash, I can tell you're using AI." And I'm like, that the M dash is just a thing that good writers use. And like, the rules of three and that kind of stuff is like, no, we taught AI that. Like AI isn't teaching us to do that. So that annoys me. But I also feel like the really truly like the way that AI generated copy now is so easy to spot. Like it has so many tells that are just like, oh, come on. And I see people online, some people are like, who cares if someone uses AI? And I'm like, for you, like if you don't care, then don't care. That's fine. To me, it feels lazy to use unedited AI generated copy, and I just feel like, well, what are we doing here? Because to get to my prediction part, I think that it is going to this whole like using AI to generate all your copy and your blog posts and your Instagram captions and everything else. I think it's going to fade away. Like I think there's already sort of a backlash coming. I don't know what that means for us as human writers, but I do feel like it's getting to the point where just like everything is diluted and it all sounds exactly the same. And no matter how much people argue with me about how you can like engineer it to write in your voice, I'm like, even still, you've got to do some, there has to be like a human touch to it because it doesn't operate like a human. It doesn't have
No, you're
the
right. And there's already
feeling. It's
been
like,
backlash, right? Like we had
yeah,
the actors strike, and part of that was because
right,
we had streaming services saying they
right.
wanted to replace actors with AI. And I'm like, I don't want to watch that. And when you see
No,
videos online, I feel I catch myself looking at like ads and things because the mouth doesn't move properly,
yes,
or
yeah,
Duolingo just got
yeah,
rid of their marketing and advertising to replace it with AI, and people did voice their objection
yeah.
because that and also you know I feel like we're diluting art, whether it's writing, whether it's strong, whatever it is, and at some point what are we going to do for jobs if everything
Right.
is
Yeah.
AI? And I'm not saying AI is bad, because it's not. I
Yeah,
mean, I
it's
use it
not.
to help me edit
It's a tool. Yeah,
podcast. I've
totally.
used it for research, and
Hmm.
occasionally when I have to write an email that's a little strong
Yep.
worded and it's not
Yep.
my
Me too.
personality,
Yep.
right? I'll be
Same.
like, here's what I need to say,
Right.
and I'll rewrite it in
Making
my
it.
voice,
Yeah.
but it helps me when I'm
Yeah.
like, listen here. So
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yes. It's. I think you're right. Like the Duolingo thing is an interesting. I was kind of watching that like somewhat intently just to see like, am I the only one who's annoyed about this stuff? So I was really happy to see that, like, oh, the whole reason this is in the news is because people are like, I don't want that. Like, cancel Duolingo. And I just feel like we need to, like, just dial it back a little bit. Because, like you said, like, it's a tool. I mean, it's like a calculator to me. It feels like the same type of function where it's like, I could figure this out. Or I could just save myself a bunch of time by, like you said, like putting in, I need to tell this person, like, pay my invoice, but I want to say it, whatever.
right.
But I do think like I am glad to see that people in general, not just people in creative fields, are rejecting it and are just saying like, no, this is not the world we want to live in where everything is like generated by robots. And I'm sure you've seen like how like some parts of Facebook now are basically just bots talking to each other. Like the
Hmm.
AI generated post and then all the comments are also bots. And I'm like, what is the point here? What's the end game? What are we
Yeah.
doing? It's yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's regardless of ageism, the direction I feel like we're going with our culture for a variety of reasons. Um, we'll not get into politics, but just things going
No
on, and
need.
with technology, like we're moving in a
Yeah.
direction that I think the younger generations don't realize is going to affect them sooner than like they think like
Yes.
we're old, which we're not, and
Right.
the boomers, like it's going to affect us. It all trickles down,
It
and
all, yeah.
yeah, and faster than you might think.
Yeah.
One of the things I found depressing also about that article, the way it was talking about Gen X. I'm like, we are adaptable because when we started our careers, like not all of us, but I mean, I'm 1974. Like when I started my career, we had computers at our desk. We were learning the internet. We were learning how to write websites and banners and dealing with
Yeah.
SEO. It was nothing like it was now. It was so hard to write for that. So we have learned technology and adapted to when new things come
Mhm.
out, especially in the arts. And you see that
Yeah.
in movies. And it was like kind of dismissed that we were able to do that, and that
Yeah.
agencies and are just kind of thinking like, well, these people, they've reached their capacity. They can't
Right.
do it anymore.
Right. Yeah. That definitely was a tone in the article that I spotted that too, where it was just, I was like, I feel like, and maybe there was a line or two about this, but I kind of felt like, wait a minute, like I'm older Gen X. Like I was born in 67. So like I remember getting my first email address and I was like 30 already. Like, I was 30 years old. The fact that we've seen the advent of the internet, like, we grew up in a world like this is kind of like sometimes a marker of I realize like, oh, I have been around a long time. Like I very much remember the first microwave ovens. Like I remember
Hmm.
the microwave like coming into the kitchen and being like a huge big deal, like, oh my God, you can cook food so fast. So like we've seen, because technology I think really started, or like I guess general public's use of technology really started to accelerate right around the time we were young. Like we have had to learn how to use the internet, cell phones. Like we didn't have anything like that, and we've adapted to all of it. And in a lot of ways, we are the ones who made it kind of what it, like, I was going to say made it what it is, but I don't know that I like what it is right now, so I
Right. I
don't
mean,
really want to
we
take
did
credit.
Google, and there are.
Yeah,
I was reading another
yeah.
article that was talking about all the Gen Xers who've done things, and some of them was like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and I'm like, no,
Like no, we
no.
don't claim them. We don't claim
Like
them. We
you
don't want
started
that.
off okay, and then you took a
Yeah.
turn to the dark side,
Yes.
but we
Yeah.
have done things that, like you're saying, with technology, and we have it like
Yeah.
when cell phones came out first, they were in your car, then they were big, then they were
Yes.
small. We had to like,
Yes.
yeah, they didn't have internet. You had to text like a million
Right.
times,
Right.
and then they did have internet, and so yeah, we have had to
Yes.
adapt and
And
change.
very rapidly. Like when you compare it, like think of our parents, for example. Not that they didn't deal with like technological change. I mean, every generation does, but I feel like the acceleration that's taken place in our generation is really striking. Like the rapid, um, just how many things we've had to learn and relearn and do differently. Like you said, how we used to be texting, like you'd have to hit the thing 3 times to get, like now that just seems hilarious to me. Like what? And like sending a photo of someone, forget it, that was a half an hour to
Oh
like
yeah.
upload it. And yeah, and I also think that like maybe because I also felt like the article did not give, like I think what occurred to me was, like I said, like I'm older Gen X, and I felt like why is this kind of, and there were people in that article that had very legitimate, like I was like, oh wow, yeah, like this is rough, I hate this for you.
Absolutely.
But also I was like, we're also just extremely, like you said at the beginning of this conversation, like we're very scrappy and adaptable, and like we're gonna figure it out.
Yep.
And it may look different than how we thought our careers would be at this age, and that does suck. But I also feel like, well, we're also not going to like lay down and die. We're not going to just be like, oh, I'm going to give up on my dreams now because I'm an old lady. Like, people are going to discover new passions, or you know and again, not to minimize anybody's struggle, because there are people who, like, it's going to be very hard to live the lifestyle that they had. But also, just a part of me, I think this is also very Gen X, is I'm kind of like, well, that's life. You know what?
Mhm.
Like, that's how life goes. It's not easy, and you do the best you can, and you keep on going. And
Yeah, my mom always would tell my brother and sister and I, well, life's not fair.
yeah,
And it's not. And
no,
I think as Gen Xers, you either have to go, I'm going to accept it, I'm
yep,
not going to accept it, and I'm going to figure out some other way to do this.
right,
And if I do accept it, I'm just going to deal and I'll find
yeah,
some other way to
yes,
fulfill myself
right,
because, yeah, I mean, had I, like, I remember in college, I went on a trip to New York, um, where we got to visit advertising agencies.
oh,
None of them ever told us how unstable the career really was. And this was like 19, I think I went in like 93, 94. And no one said, like, by the way, this is not a stable career because if an account goes away, you could lose your job. If the economy, you could lose your job. You have to, they did
yeah,
tell us, you have to move around if you're going to get ahead. It was no longer. And I think that's one thing. I don't know if it's this article. There was a couple others that I read that was like, they just stay in a job. And I'm like, no, I don't remember as Gen Xers. I feel like we were the generation where it was like, if you want to get ahead,
yes,
you're going to have to go to
yeah,
another place because you're going
yes,
to hit a wall.
yeah, yeah. We never had those careers where, like, that our parents and grandparents did, where you would like work at one place for 30, 40 years. Like, I don't think we ever expected that, even though I also feel like it was never explicitly told to us, like, that this could, I mean, yeah, maybe just because I was in teaching, it was different. But yeah, anyway, Yes.
Well, and even teaching has changed because kids have changed. And I mean, teaching has always been a very hard job,
Yeah.
underappreciated for what you're educating the youth so
Yeah.
they can grow up.
Yeah.
And, but I remember being a kid where if your teacher said you were misbehaving, your parents were going to side with the teacher with a few exceptions, right? If like,
Yes.
I had a couple teachers where like one teacher my dad made cry because he made a really obnoxious comment. My dad's like, no. He was like, well, he thought he was made a comment because my dad was an orthodontist. Oh, your parents are rich. You can go anywhere to college. And I was like, all right, dude, this is the last straw of you picking
Oh.
on me. And I told my dad, and he made the guy. He was like a legend. Everyone's like, your dad made Mr. Fletcher cry. We all hated this guy. But now you hear like, parents don't side with teachers. They're like, that's not my kid. So I feel like all the careers, even if you're a doctor or a lawyer, like it's every career is
Yes.
changing
Yes.
and there's a struggle. And I don't think it matters what age you are. Um, but I definitely feel like it's really frustrating for us because boomers aren't retiring, which I understand why.
Right. Makes sense.
And
Yeah.
then you have the younger generations who are like,
Yeah.
I'll take less money because I need a job
Yes.
because I can't
Yeah.
afford anything.
Yep.
And then there's like us where they're like, yeah, y'all can go figure something else out.
Yes, it's so true. Like and also just a side note, that is about 95% of why I left teaching was exactly that. Like where I taught, which will remain unnamed in Atlanta. It was a private school and the parents had our home numbers.
Oh, wow.
Parents had our home numbers. And about the third or fourth time that I got a post 10 p.m. phone call from a parent that was upset about that I didn't let a kid off the hook for homework or whatever, I was just kind of like, you know what? I can't, because it was that shift. Like you said, I mean, if I had gotten in trouble as a kid, like a note home, and not because my parents were these hard asses, but just because like it was so deeply embarrassing. Like, oh my God, like I didn't live up to her expectations and this is so embarrassing. And these kids now are so different. And also just like so I have one who's graduating. I have one who's 28 and one who's 22 and is about to graduate. And she and I were talking the other night and she was like, Mom, everyone is so worried about like media literacy, which valid, we all should be.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, I'm worried about literacy. Like, because she's like, I see these teachers on TikTok that are like, yeah, these eighth graders can't read on a third grade level. And part of it is like COVID must have been horrific for educators. That's a whole other topic. I completely lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
About how, like, why you left teaching because things have
Yes,
changed.
but you had something else before why I
Oh,
left.
about how, like, that it's, I guess I was talking about it's affecting everybody and how we
Right.
are kind of like, just kind
Yeah.
of as we always are, like, go figure it out for yourself.
Yes.
And
Right.
I feel like a little bit after a while, I'm like, can someone give us a break? Like, seriously, I'm
Oh, I
tired
know.
of figuring things out for myself. I'm
I
exhausted.
know. Oh my God. I am too. I am too. And last night, in fact, I had like a little mini pity party for myself because I was like, I am just so tired. Like, so tired. And I also feel like Gen X parenting is also very different because and I was just reading somewhere about this recently that like people are just a lot closer to their parents now than like we were. Like I didn't feel compelled to share every single aspect of my life with my parents and I was like pretty close to them, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely, by the time I was like 18, I mean I left the house when I was 17 and never came back. Like and I just, we talked on the phone once a week. It wasn't like we were in constant touch. And it's just so much more common now. Like my kids are very much like, I don't know if I would say they're dependent on me, but they need a lot, they need a lot. And I don't know, like last night it was just kind of one of those times where I was like, okay, they both are needing me, like my emotional energy, I'm tired, like money is feeling tight right now. And it was just, I had that same thought, like, why is it so hard for our generation? But then I was like, well, I guess I'm lucky because both of my parents are dead. And I'm not in that generation.
Yeah,
that
the
has-
sandwich generation.
Yes, like
Yeah.
that truly, I feel like that could break me. That could
Yeah.
really
Yeah, I
break.
lost my parents in 2017 and 2020. And just in the like from 2015, my mom got sick to when my dad passed away in 2020. That was like the 5 worst years
Oh
of my
yeah,
entire. It was
yeah,
awful. Just sickness, death, sickness, sickness, and watching, my parents who I love dearly
yeah.
just go through the worst things, cancer and dementia. And
Oh
just yeah, and I'm single, and so like I stepped in more. Not that my brother and sister didn't help, but like it was
yeah,
exhausting to like have to
yeah.
take care of them. And then my sister and brother also have kids, and so and there are a lot of people in our generation who are taking care of aging parents
Yes,
and raising children and trying to live their own lives.
yes,
And it's
yeah.
it's a lot. And we
It
don't,
is a lot.
and Gen X, we don't, like, we'll throw our own little pity parties. We don't want to share that because nobody wants to hear it anyways, which is
Right, right.
the way we were raised, right? Like,
I was just gonna say, yes, that is definitely how we were raised. Like, well, nobody wants to hear it. So, like you said, like, go figure it out. Like, which I now kind of look at as a blessing in
yes,
a way.
yes,
Like, yeah, I think it might, like, faced with the alternative of crying about it for what? Like, to who? Like,
right.
everybody's struggling right now. And again, like you said, we're not going to talk about politics. But I will say, a lot of people are a lot of people are feeling stretched, and I feel
Yeah,
like we've never really dealt with COVID as a society, as a culture. We
no.
just kind of like moved on, and everything's worse than it
Oh
was
yeah,
before that.
it's
And
getting
it's
worse now.
getting much worse now. And it's just like, I almost feel like in some ways we're probably like made for this moment because we will just figure it out. Just, I think we know enough, like, not to ever just like I love Gen Z and I love millennials. Like, I don't have any, I'm not like, oh, they suck. But I will say
Sometimes I'm
that
like, y'all suck, but
like
every once in a while.
there are things that suck about them for sure. And one of them to me is and again, this was something my younger daughter and I were talking about because she's very Gen Z. But she agrees with me because I was like, Gen Z loves to lead with their mental health diagnoses and
Hmm.
their like conditions, their challenges. And I'm like, I feel in some ways so lucky because I'm not a boomer. So I'm not going to act like I've never struggled or like, just everything's fine, everything's fine. Like, I'm not that person. But I'm also not going to introduce myself to someone with basically like, I have this condition and,
Hmm.
or like all the things that they do. Now it sounds like I really am talking badly about Gen Z. It's just a little detour, but the way that like all the accommodations they'll make for themselves to not have to do things that I'm like, you need to be able to do this. Like, you just do. Like, I know
Yeah.
it's hard and it gives you anxiety and I get that, but like at a certain point, we can't be just like, I mean, and the phone is a bad example because I hate to make a phone call too. Like, I absolutely hate it.
Same.
I don't like to get them. I don't like to make them. It makes me nervous. Like, I get all that, but I still do it. Like, I do it. And I don't expect like my doctor's office, for example, to like accommodate me and like, I need you to text me because it makes me too nervous to talk to you on the phone. Like, that is that feels to me like that's going to be a challenge for them as they get older. Like,
Yes. Like, I will give them credit for, talking about mental health because
yeah,
we definitely didn't. Like, I can
for
just remember
sure.
the conversations about suicide when we were young versus the way they are now. It's completely
Yes,
changed. And
completely different.
mental health was not talked about. And so I think it's a blessing of our generation. Like, we could figure things out, but it's also
Yeah,
a little bit of a curse in that we're really
yeah,
bad about asking for help. Like, we feel like I remember like I struggled with depression, but I didn't want to tell my parents. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I was like, I got to figure this out.
Yeah.
And because I didn't bring it up sooner, I struggled with it for so long,
Yeah.
and I didn't know what to do. And I was just told to suck it up when I did say things. So I give them credit
Yes.
for
Yes.
speaking up, but like
Definitely.
it can't be your whole identity. And I
Right.
think they're also struggling at work because they think everybody should accommodate. So I feel like
Yes.
there's
It just
there's some
doesn't work
struggle.
that way. It just
Yeah,
doesn't work
it's
that way. Yeah. That's the mental health thing is super interesting to me about our generation versus other ones, because same with me, like my I had like such bad postpartum depression, but I didn't even notice. Like I didn't know it. And when I try to explain that to my kids now, they're like, "What do you mean?" They literally just like they're like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I was just so used to just like you just forge ahead, you just forge ahead." And when I finally reached the point where I was like, "I probably should talk to someone," like after the first session, the psychiatrist was like, "Wow, like you're really really in the throes of like dark depression, like let's get you on medication." And I was like, medication? Like I'm not crazy, I'm not a crazy person. And I feel like we now have learned how we're better for sure about taking care of ourselves, but that is a huge, like when I try to explain that to my kids, like I'm like, I didn't like if I felt things growing up, which I did, of course, like, 'cause I'm a
yes.
deeply like emotional person. I was just like too embarrassed to be, like you said, like I just didn't, it didn't occur to me to tell my mom like these very dark thoughts I had, because I knew that even though she also suffered from depression and just never dealt with it, but very clearly had like depression, ADHD, didn't deal with any of it. But I knew that if I told her, it would be, what do you have to be unhappy about? Like, you're, basically like, you're fine. Walk it off. Like,
Yeah, suck it up. It's fine. Yeah.
suck it up. It's fine. You're fine.
Right.
And they're just like, Mom, seriously? And I'm like, yeah, no one talked about that. Like, you would
No.
never have told your best friend in eighth grade, like, oh, sometimes my anxiety gets so bad that I feel like I might throw up. It's so terrible. Because people would have been like, get it together. Like,
Yeah.
pull yourself together. And
Because you
it's,
didn't want to be the weird kid or the bad kid. And we did hear like I'm happy you have feelings, and we heard that at school too. But we don't care like your feelings. But I remember my
yeah,
parents were like, "You're very sensitive." I'm like, that should have been your first clue that I was going to have some problems. And they did put me in
yeah.
therapy when I had a really bad teacher in fourth grade. She didn't like me, and she would
Oh,
change stuff on my paper and then write like B, best you'll ever do. And oh yeah.
are
And so
you
my she
serious?
ruined like my self-confidence as a fourth grader. So my parents put me in therapy because they're like, and then they made sure my brother and sister didn't get that teacher. Mom's like later, she goes, I should have just taken you out of that class. I'm like, yeah, think.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
experimental child. But yeah, our generation really like, not that our parents didn't care about us or didn't love us, but they were working, both of
Yes.
them usually,
Yep.
and dealing with a lot of things,
Dealing
and
with a lot of things.
you know, going
Yep.
on in the world and raising kids, and
Yeah.
their parents didn't care about their feelings. So they didn't, they would try to adapt and
Yeah.
change as I think we do, but you know,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't think they had to deal with, I mean, I think there was ageism in careers, but usually it was like, okay, it's time for you to retire, and you could retire even if you were forced to
Yeah.
retire with
Yeah.
money, a
Yes.
pension. You could live your life very comfortably. Now, you can't do that. If you're
You
being forced
can't.
out in your
Yeah.
40s or 50s or even your
Right.
60s, what are you supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah. What are you supposed to do? Yeah, it's very, I don't, again, perimenopausal brain. Well, what am I saying? Full menopausal brain. Menopausal. Um, yeah, sometimes I'm just like, whoa, I'm in a groove. And then I'm like, where am I? What am I doing?
Same.
Oh, everything. But back to ageism, which was our topic. The internet and like the focus on visual, showing up visually on the internet. For whatever reason, I think just because I've always been like an early adopter of like cultural trends, I just like things that are new and novel and different. Like very early on, after, blogging kind of burnt out, I felt like pretty comfortable being on the internet, like showing my face on the internet. And I didn't really think all that much about like, do people think I look old? Until I think it was in like 2019. I made a TikTok. I don't make TikToks anymore, but I made this TikTok that basically I was talking about how men think it's like slander against women to say someone has daddy issues. And I was like, daddy issues are caused by dads. Like that's that's a man who did wrong. And so like what do you think you're doing saying someone has daddy issues? Like that's not her fault. Like she was stuck in
No.
this whatever. So it went like semi-viral-ish. And it found its way to like the young men's rights activist side of
Oh
TikTok.
no.
And it got ugly so fast. And I would like, the youth, the way they talk about your nervous system, like my nervous system was flooded when I was seeing these comments. One just literally said, "You're too old." And I just like, I look at that now and I'm like, too old for what? To
Right.
exist? To talk? To like, what are you saying there? But it was just so blunt, like, "You're too old." And it was like, sent me into this, I don't know, probably a couple years, and it still exists today, where I'm like, I don't really want to show my old face on the internet because like someone is going to say something to me, which now I think I would probably handle it a lot better, but I'm self-censoring more. So like yesterday I had this kind of like I was out for a walk and I had this thought about a terrible blog post that I wrote one time. And I was like, "Oh, this would be kind of a funny Instagram story." So I'm just like record myself talking about like I discovered this blog that I wrote and how terrible it was and riddled with errors, and I would like never want anyone to see it these days. So when I watched it back, I was like, "Oh, but you can see like the crepey skin on my like you can like this looks And so I just deleted it. And I was like, "Okay, so now I'm doing the work of the internet for it."
Mhm.
Like I'm now at the point where I'm like in my head I'm like, "You're too old." So that's not good either. And I feel like there's kind of like I feel like this is happening, and hopefully it's going to happen more, that I think more women in particular are kind of taking a stance of like we're allowed to be visible and like we're allowed to show up the way that we look, and it's okay. Like we should not be like I guess the point I'm making is I think there's like important work to be done there with like
Yes.
we can show up without filters and like we don't have to try and bend to what 35-year-olds look like because we're not 35. And
And some of them look older than we do. So not to be mean, but
that is so real. Like and yeah, I mean some 25-year-olds with like filler and stuff, I'm just like, you look like a real housewife. Like
hmm
you why are you making your beautiful youthful face look like a real housewife? It's Yeah, I think it's interesting. I don't, do you follow, oh my gosh, what is her name? Mary Jane Fahey. Her account is called Glorious Broads.
I don't.
She's on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And I think for a while I think maybe she started out as a YouTube channel, but she talks exclusively to women over 65 about like every aspect of life. Like, the exact same topics we're talking about here, just with women who are a little older than we are. And it's so like it's such a boomer thing, I think, to be like I don't know if maybe it wasn't a boomer thing, maybe it was a my mom thing, but like in my the women in my life growing up, it was very looked down upon to feel like you could like show yourself off or like it was like I just remember my mom and my aunts talking about somebody looking slutty, or like, oh, she thinks she looks great but she doesn't notice that like crepey skin and whatever. And so I look at women who are 65, 70, and I'm like, they're doing amazing work by being on camera because their generation really felt that way. Like,
Oh yeah.
like you can't like, oh my God, you look old, she looks old. And then I feel like we have kind of like the runoff of that.
Yeah.
I don't know. That is a part, like I know that's a whole other topic, like ageism and appearance, but
And women definitely face it more. Even
oh, for
like,
sure.
like I'm my sparkles, as my hairdresser calls it, are coming in. I need to get a call. But like I had a friend go, well, it's really expensive. Why don't you just go gray? And I'm like, no, I will. And one, because like I don't want to look old,
Right.
but also, and my hair is not the wiry. Like I know it would come in and it would still look the same, but I'm just not
Yeah.
ready to go there.
Yeah.
And it is vanity.
Yep.
And I joke, I'm like, even if I have to crawl to the salon when I'm like in my 80s, I will be coloring my hair because,
Yeah.
like I go out without makeup, but it's like, it's one or the other. It's
I
not,
know exactly what you mean.
yeah.
Yes.
But as women, like even in the workforce, like even from a young age, like I'm hoping it's not the
Mm.
same way now. Like our looks mattered, your weight mattered, how you
Yes.
looked, whatever, how you
Oh
presented
yeah.
yourself. It was
Yeah.
not easy. And I do think we still get dismissed. And the younger online, when you're saying like you're old, they don't have an argument. So it's just like, you're old.
Right.
I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm so wounded. I'm old. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm old. And I have more experience and more common sense
Right.
than you do.
Yes.
And call
Yeah.
me old.
Yeah, right. Like that's the best you can do. Like,
Yeah.
yes, like I have more wisdom and all of those things. You're right. It's such it's so meant to be cutting, but like if we don't take it that way, then it has no power whatsoever. And yeah, I definitely feel like my daughters are very aware. Like they sort of fascinate me because I don't remember ever as a young woman. I just don't remember anything other than seeing all my flaws. Like that was all I ever saw in the mirror was
Yeah.
like just all the flaws, everything I wanted to fix. I don't ever remember looking in the mirror and being like, God, I'm gorgeous. Like I look so good. And these two, my two daughters, like they will just like freely say things like, well, I know I have a lot of advantages because I'm really pretty. Or like, I'm pretty and young and like I'm going to use it while I can. Like I know it's an advantage. And I'm like, A, you're so right.
Yeah.
And B, like, what does that feel like to just be like, to not just focus on your flaws constantly? Like,
Right. To accept
like,
yourself and
yeah,
just,
to accept
you're
yourself,
amazing. However you look, however you like, yeah.
right? To just be like, and I've always tried to sort of like conceal that from them. Like, I don't ever want them to think that I grew up in a totally different way of, but occasionally we've talked about it, like after my second glass of wine, and I'll just be like, let me tell you something. Like, let me tell you what it's like for me. And they're always just like, Mom, that's so sad. Like, that's so sad that you felt that way. And I'm like, but every girl I knew did. And like, that's just like what we talked about, like as soon as we became teenagers, it was like, I'm fat, my
Hmm.
skin looks terrible, my hair is flat. All and I
Even
just
though our hair was gigantic.
was gigantic, ginormous.
At least in the front and the back, it was totally flat. But our hair was, we were
Yeah,
very
out the
flammable generation.
yes, a very flammable. That's your book title, A Very Flammable Generation. That's good.
But it's, we had like magazines and, like the supermodel. And so we were always comparing ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And now the kids have the internet, which I think is worse because,
Oh, yeah.
you
Yes.
have like Gen Alpha with like the Sephora kids and they're putting stuff on their skin that is just, I'm like, that's the one thing I will thank my mom for is like, she would not let us wear makeup until I think 17
Yeah.
we wear lipstick and then mascara and slowly got into
Yeah.
it. And I'm like, I think my skin is better for it.
Yeah, it
Probably
probably
genetic,
is.
but
Yeah, because
yeah,
you weren't putting retinol on at 10 years old, like,
I didn't even know
that's
what retinol was
yeah,
until
oh, me either. Yeah, that's yeah, that's, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I'm hoping, at some point with the ageism, like I do, of course, men face it, women face it more. I would love to
Oh,
see
yeah,
that not be a thing because
yeah,
it's still hard to be a woman in the world. Um,
yes,
part of it is our own issue where we see each other as competition. I
yes,
definitely experienced that in the agency world. I had women, they were my worst bosses. And I'm like, when I do well, that
yeah,
reflects on you. And they never understood that. I do
yeah,
think the younger people are more about there's room for everyone. At least I
yeah,
think say that.
right,
But it would be nice if like Gen X women, like we stop seeing each other as competition. And because when we, one rises, we all rise, and we should all
Yeah.
be supporting each other because we're all facing the same challenges.
Yes, the same challenges. That's absolutely true. And that's I again like in the teaching world, it was so different because my bosses were pretty much always women, but it wasn't the same as what I hear from my friends who worked in the agency world, where people say that they had these vicious, cutthroat, ultra competitive colleagues and bosses, and I'm just like, ooh, we don't need to do that to each other.
No,
We don't need to do that. Because like you said, we're all dealing with the same stuff, and it's so much easier when you can like look around and see other people, sharing who they really are. It makes you feel freer to be who you are, all that stuff. And I feel like we are getting it now. Like we didn't grow up with it, but I think we are getting a lot better now at like, wait a second, we would all do better if we, saw each other as allies instead of enemies.
Yes. And I think that's a good place to leave it on like a positive note that we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was such an interesting conversation. And if people want to, I'm going to put all your information obviously in the show notes, but if anybody wants to reach out to you to work with you or to talk about any of this stuff, is there the best place they can, obviously not TikTok, but is there some
Yeah, no TikTok. You won't find me on TikTok. So my Instagram
Okay.
DMs is my favorite place to converse with people. And thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. And I feel like it's good that you kind of pumped the brakes for us, because I feel like we could have easily gone for another
Yeah,
hour.
that's my one thing is like I've tried to get less, but
I'm glad you reined us in. Yeah, it's a wide-ranging conversation, and yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
well, thank you so much. I'm so happy that you were here. Thank you again to Lib for chatting with me. We could have kept going to like get us to stop. Gen Xers, we love to talk once you get us going. I think it was a really interesting conversation, a little all over the place, but interesting hearing Liv's perspectives and, talking about our generation, the challenges we face, and how I think we're affected by those, how we've adapted, and also to talk about, some of the things that the younger generation is getting right, some of the things they're not. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed episode 28. I hope to have some more conversations about ageism this month. If you have a story that you would like to share, you can find in the show notes along with Lib's information an email that you can send to me to tell me the stories. We have an Instagram, the Gen X Experience Pod. Feel free to DM me. I'm thinking about starting a Substack, but I don't know because there's some little issues with Substack, so maybe it'll be a newsletter. But I want to keep this conversation going about all topics related to midlife and Gen X, and really, form a community where we can all share our generational trauma and reminisce about the good old days of the 80s and 70s and 90s where there was no internet. And the things we did were only recorded if we took pictures, and even then, they may not be around anymore. So, and I will end this podcast the way I end every podcast, with little Busty Boo in the background if you're watching on YouTube. Don't you forget about me, because I won't forget about you. Until next time, my fellow Gen Xers. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Gen X Experience. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it on social media or with a friend. We'll see you back here next time.